The stars outside the window were beautiful. Princess Yuna watched them pass by as her royal ship moved through space. She was returning home from a meeting with leaders of a distant world. It had been a boring trip, full of politics and empty smiles. She was tired and wanted nothing more than to rest in her own palace. She had no idea that everything was about to change. The first explosion shook the entire ship. Yuna fell from her seat and hit the floor hard. Red lights began flashing everywhere. Alarms screamed through the halls. She heard her guards shouting, their voices filled with panic. Someone yelled, "Raiders." They came out of nowhere. Yuna pushed herself up. Her heart was beating fast, but she forced herself to stay calm. She was a princess of the Valari Empire. She had been trained since birth to show no fear. But when she looked out the window again, her blood went cold. Massive warships surrounded them. They were dark and ugly, covered in weapons and scars from many battles. She recognized the design immediately. These ships belonged to the Krath Dominion, a brutal group of warriors who lived for war and conquest. They were enemies of her empire, and they were not known for showing mercy. Her guards rushed into the room. "Your Highness, we must get you to the escape pod." But it was already too late. The doors at the far end of the hall exploded inward. Krath soldiers poured through the smoke. They were tall and powerful, with thick gray skin and eyes that glowed like fire. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Yuna's guards fought bravely. They stood their ground and fired their weapons without hesitation. But the Kraths were stronger, faster, and there were too many of them. One by one, her protectors fell. In less than a minute, it was over. Yuna stood alone in the middle of the room. She refused to run. She refused to scream. She lifted her chin and stared at the enemy soldiers with cold eyes. If she was going to die, she would die with dignity. But they did not kill her. Instead, a new figure stepped through the ruined doorway. He was taller than the others, and his armor was decorated with symbols of rank. His face was covered in scars, and when he smiled, it was a terrible thing to see. "Princess Yuna of the Valari Empire," he said. His voice was deep and rough. "I am Lord Vec. You are now my prisoner." They took her to the main warship and locked her in a small, cold room. There was no window, no furniture, except a hard bed, and the walls were made of thick metal. She could hear the guards outside her door, talking and laughing. They thought this was funny. They thought she was helpless. Yuna sat on the bed and waited. Her people would come for her. The Valari Empire had the finest warriors in the galaxy. They would send a fleet. They would tear through the Krath and bring her home. She was sure of it. Days passed. No one came. Lord Vec visited her once. He told her that he had sent a message to her empire. He wanted them to give up several planets in exchange for her life. If they refused, he would kill her slowly and send the recording to every world in the galaxy. "Your people are weak," he said, watching her face for signs of fear. "They care more about their pride than your life. I wonder how long they will make you wait." Yuna said nothing. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid, but late at night, when she was alone in the dark, she began to wonder. Where were her people? Why had no one come? Did they really care about her, or was she just a political tool to be thrown away when things got difficult? Far away, in the heart of Valari space, her brother Prince Taiwan was facing a terrible choice. The royal council had gathered in the war room. Generals and advisors argued with each other, their voices echoing off the ancient walls. Some wanted to send a fleet immediately. Others warned that such an action would start a full-scale war with the Krath's dominion. Millions could die. "We cannot risk the entire empire for one person," an old advisor said coldly. "Even if that person is a princess." Taiwan slammed his hand on the table. "She is my sister. I will not abandon her." But he knew the advisor was right. A direct attack would take too long. By the time their fleet arrived, Yuna would already be dead. He needed another way. He needed someone who could slip past the Krath defenses, get inside their warship, and bring his sister home before anyone knew what happened. He needed the impossible. That night, Taiwan met with a contact from the underground network. This network connected people who worked in the shadows, doing jobs that no government would officially approve. Smugglers, spies, and mercenaries. The best of the best and the worst of the worst. I need someone who can do what cannot be done, Taiwan said. Someone who can walk into a Krath warship alone and walk out with my sister. The contact was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke a name. There is one. A human. He calls himself Doan. Taiwan frowned. A human? Those weak creatures from that small planet? You cannot be serious. I am very serious, the contact replied. This human has completed every mission he has ever taken. He has done things that should not be possible. The Krath will never expect a human. They will laugh at the idea. And that is exactly why he will succeed. Taiwan thought about it. He thought about his sister, alone and afraid in enemy hands. He thought about the galaxy watching, waiting to see what the Valari Empire would do. Finally, he made his decision. Contact the human, he said. Tell him the job is his. Somewhere in the outer reaches of space, aboard a small ship called the Pale Dawn, a message arrived. A man with tired eyes and steady hands read it carefully. He did not smile. He did not hesitate. He simply turned to his partner and spoke. We have work to do. The Pale Dawn was not a beautiful ship. It was old, scratched, and covered with marks from countless repairs. To anyone looking at it, the ship seemed like a piece of junk that should have been thrown away years ago. But that was exactly what Doan wanted people to think. Inside, the ship was something else entirely. Hidden beneath the ugly surface were powerful engines, advanced weapons, and systems that had been modified and improved over many years. Nari had done most of the work herself. She was a genius with machines, and she had turned this old ship into one of the fastest and most dangerous vessels in the galaxy. Nara was sitting at her station when Doan walked in. She had short dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been working with Dohan for 5 years now, and she knew him better than anyone. When she saw his face, she already knew what was coming. Another impossible job? She asked. Doan nodded and handed her the message. She read it quickly, and her eyebrows went up. A Valari princess, held by the Krath Dominion, on a warship in the middle of their territory? She let out a long breath. Doan, this is crazy. Even for us. The payment is good, he said simply. The payment won't matter if we're dead. Doan sat down across from her. He was not a big man. He was not tall or muscular. He looked ordinary in almost every way. His face was calm and his voice was quiet. But Nari had seen what he could do. She had watched him walk into situations where death was certain, and somehow, he always walked out again. I can do this, he said. I've studied the Krath. I know how they think. They're proud and they're strong, but they're also predictable. They follow patterns. They trust their power too much. That makes them blind. Nari shook her head slowly, but she was already pulling up star maps on her screen. Tell me the plan. For the next several hours, they worked together. Doan explained what he needed, and Nari found ways to make it happen. The Krath warship was deep in enemy space, surrounded by patrol ships and detection systems. A direct approach was impossible. But there were other ways. Here, Nari said, pointing to a section of the map. There's an asteroid field near their location. The Krath avoid it because navigation is difficult. But I can fly us through. Doan studied the route. It was dangerous. One mistake, and they would crash into a rock and die in seconds. But it was also unexpected. The Krath would never believe anyone would try it. Do it, he said. Nari smiled slightly. You're going to get us both killed someday, not today. They set their course and jumped into hyperspace. As the stars stretched into lines around them, Doan went to the back of the ship to prepare. He checked his weapons carefully. A pistol that was small but powerful. A blade that had been with him for many years. A few small devices that could create explosions or disable electronics. Nothing fancy. Nothing complicated. Just the basics. Nair's voice came through the speaker. You know, most species in this galaxy think humans are weak. They look at us and see small creatures with soft skin and short lives. They think we're barely worth noticing. I know, Doan said. Doesn't that bother you? He thought about it for a moment. No, it's useful. When they underestimate you, they make mistakes. And mistakes can be exploited.
Else.
They dropped out of hyperspace near the asteroid field. The rocks were huge, some of them bigger than cities. They tumbled through space in a slow, deadly dance. Any pilot with sense would go around. Nari flew straight in. The pale dawn twisted and turned through the chaos. Neris's hands moved across the controls with incredible speed. She didn't think about what she was doing. She just felt it. The ship was an extension of her body, and she moved it like a dancer. Doan watched her work. He said nothing, but he was impressed. He always was. After what felt like forever, they emerged on the other side. The Krath warship was visible in the distance, a massive dark shape against the stars. Patrol ships moved around it, but none of them were looking in this direction. No one expected company from the asteroid field. Nar brought them in slowly, using minimal power. The pale dawn was almost invisible, just another piece of space debris drifting through the void. I can get you to the maintenance hatch on the lower section, Nari said. From there, you're on your own until you reach the cargo bay. I'll be waiting. Doan put on a light spacesuit. It wasn't fancy armor like what the Krath wore. It was thin, flexible, and quiet. It let him move fast and stay hidden. That was what mattered. Keep the engines warm, he said. We might need to leave in a hurry. We always need to leave in a hurry, Nari replied. Good luck, Doan. Try not to die, smiled slightly. It was a rare thing. I'll try. The airlock opened, and he pushed himself into the cold emptiness of space. The warship grew larger as he approached. He could see Krath soldiers through some of the windows, going about their business. They had no idea he was coming. Doan reached the maintenance hatch and used a small device to hack the lock. It opened without a sound. He slipped inside and found himself in a narrow corridor filled with pipes and machinery. The air was warm and smelled of metal. He was inside the enemy ship. He was alone. He was just one human against hundreds of Krath warriors, but that had never stopped him before. He checked his earpiece. Nari? I'm in. Good. The princess is being held on level 7, section 12. That's deep inside the ship. You'll have to go through their security center to get there. Understood? Began to move through the corridors, silent as a shadow. The mission had begun. Yuna had stopped counting the days. Time moved strangely in her small prison cell. There was no window to show her the stars, no clock to mark the hours. There was only the cold metal walls, the hard bed, and the endless waiting. She tried to stay strong. She exercised in the small space, doing whatever movements she could to keep her body ready. She recited old poems in her head to keep her mind sharp. She told herself again and again that rescue was coming. But deep inside, doubt was growing like a dark flower. The Krath guards visited her twice a day to bring food. They looked at her the way one might look at a small animal in a cage. With amusement, with contempt, she was nothing to them. Just a bargaining piece to be traded away. Tonight seemed no different from any other night. Yuna lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the ship, the hum of engines, the footsteps of soldiers, the occasional burst of rough laughter. Then she heard something new. It was a soft sound at first, a thud, then another, then silence. She sat up, her heart beginning to beat faster. Something was happening outside her door. She heard voices, Krath voices rough and angry, then the sound of weapons firing, then screaming, then more silence. Yuna pressed herself against the far wall. Her mind was racing. Was this a rescue? Was it a rebellion? Or was it something worse? The door to her cell made a strange noise. Someone was working on the lock from outside. She held her breath and waited. Every second felt like an hour. The door slid open. Yuna had imagined this moment many times. She had pictured Valari soldiers in shining armor, tall and proud, speaking words of comfort as they carried her to safety. She had imagined the finest warriors of her empire, the elite guard that protected the royal family. What she saw was none of those things. A single figure stood in the doorway. He was not tall. He wore no armor, just a simple dark suit that was now stained with blood. His face was calm, almost peaceful, as if he had just finished a walk in a garden rather than fighting through a warship full of enemies. Yuna stared at him. She recognized what he was immediately. The soft skin, the round ears, the small frame. This was a human. One of those weak creatures from that insignificant planet at the edge of known space. She had learned about them in her lessons as a child. They were considered primitive, fragile, barely worth mentioning. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Where is my rescue team?" The human looked at her with steady eyes. "I am your rescue team. My name is Doan. We need to move now." Yuna did not move. "This is impossible. The Valari Empire would never send a human. Where are the real soldiers?" "There are no real soldiers," Doan said patiently. "There is only me. Your brother hired me because no one else could do this job. If you want to live, you will follow me. If you want to stay here and wait for someone more impressive, that is your choice. But I am leaving in 30 seconds, with or without you." He turned and walked back into the corridor without waiting for her answer. Yuna stood frozen for a moment. This was insane. This was ridiculous. A human could not possibly have gotten this far alone. It had to be some kind of trick. But then she looked at the corridor outside her cell. She saw the bodies of Krath soldiers lying on the ground. Massive warriors, twice the size of the human, now motionless and silent. Whatever had happened here was real. She made her decision and followed him. The warship was like a maze of dark corridors and harsh lights. Doan moved through it like he had been born there. He knew every turn, every hiding spot, every moment when guards would pass. Yuna struggled to keep up. She was fast and trained, but he was always 3 steps ahead. "How do you know this ship so well?" she whispered. "I studied the designs before I came," he replied quietly. "The Krath use standard layouts for their warships. Once you learn one, you know them all." They turned a corner and almost walked into a patrol. 3 Krath soldiers stood blocking the path, their weapons rising the moment they saw the intruders. Yuna expected to die. She expected the human to fall in seconds. Instead, she watched something she would never forget. Doan moved before the soldiers could fire. He was not faster than them. He was not stronger, but he seemed to know exactly what they would do before they did it. He ducked under the first attack, stepped around the second, and struck with his blade in 3 quick movements. The soldiers fell without ever touching him. Yuna stared at the bodies, then at the human. Her mind could not accept what her eyes had seen. She breathed. Doan wiped his blade clean and kept walking. Humans learn. We watch our enemies. We find patterns. We exploit weakness. "It is what we have always done," he continued through the ship. More soldiers came. Each time, the result was the same. The Krath were bigger and stronger, but they fought with pride and honor. Following the rules of combat, they had known all their lives. Doan followed no rules. He used the environment. He attacked from unexpected angles. He did things that no proper warrior would ever do, and he won. Every single time, Yuna began to understand something. The galaxy had been wrong about humans. They were not weak because they lacked strength. They were dangerous because they had learned to survive without it. "My people underestimated your kind," she said quietly as they paused in a dark alcove. Doan nodded. "Everyone does. That is why I am still alive." A new alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed everywhere. A voice echoed through the ship, speaking in the Krath language. "They know we are here," Doan said. "The difficult part is about to begin." Yuna looked at him, the strange human who had walked alone into enemy territory to save someone he had never met. For the first time since her capture, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. "Then let us begin," she said. They ran together into the darkness. The alarms were deafening. Red lights painted everything in the color of blood. All around the warship, soldiers were running, shouting, searching for the intruders who had dared to invade their territory. The Kraths were furious. Someone had walked into their home and made them look like fools. Lord Vex stood in the command center, watching reports flood across his screens. His hands were clenched into massive fists. His eyes burned with anger. "One intruder," he growled. "One single intruder has caused all this chaos. Find this creature and bring it to me. I will tear it apart with my own hands." His officers scrambled to obey. Patrols were doubled. Every exit was blocked. Every corridor was watched. There was no way out of this ship. The intruder would be caught. It was only a matter of time. Deep in the lower sections of the warship, Doan and Yuna were running out of options. Every path they tried led to more soldiers. Every door they approached was locked tight. The Krath were closing in from all directions. "We cannot continue like this," Yuna said, breathing hard. "There are too many of them." Doan's face remained calm. He touched his earpiece. "Nari's status." Nari's voice crackled through. "Bad news. They've locked down the entire ship. The maintenance hatch we used is sealed. The only way out now is through the main cargo bay. But that's where they're concentrating their forces." "How many?" "Sensors show at least 50 soldiers. Maybe more." And Doan. "Vec is on his way there personally." Yuna's blood went cold at the mention of that name. She remembered his scarred face, his cruel smile, his promises of what he would do if her people refused his demands. "We have to find another way," she said. "Going there is suicide." Doan looked at her. There was no fear in his eyes. There was only calculation, like a machine analyzing a problem. "There's no other way," he said quietly. "But suicide is not certain. Difficult is not impossible. We keep moving." They made their way through the ship, avoiding patrols where they could, fighting through them when they could not. Doan was starting to slow down. Yuna noticed blood on his arm, on his side. He had been wounded during their escape, though he never complained, never stopped. "You are hurt," she said. "I am still moving," he replied. "That is all that matters." They reached the cargo bay. It was a vast open space filled with crates and machinery. And soldiers. Dozens of Krath warriors stood in formation, their weapons ready, waiting for the intruders they knew would come. Lord Vex stood at the center of them all. When he saw Doan and Yuna enter, he laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the bay. "So this is the mighty rescue force," he said. "One human. One weak, pathetic human." He looked at Yuna. "Your empire must truly hate you, princess, to send this creature instead of real warriors." Yuna said nothing. She watched Doan's face, waiting to see what he would do. Duhan stepped forward. He looked small compared to the massive Krath soldiers around him. He looked tired and wounded and alone. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "Let us go," he said. "And no more of your soldiers have to die." The laughter that followed shook the walls. Every Krath soldier joined in, mocking the human who dared to threaten them. Lord Vex's eyes gleamed with cruel joy. "Kill him," he ordered. Slowly, what happened next would become a legend. The princess herself would tell the story many times in the years to come, and each time people would struggle to believe it. The Krath attacked as one. They were trained warriors, fighting on their own ship against a single wounded human. They expected victory in seconds. They were wrong. Doan did not fight like a warrior. He fought like something else entirely. Like water flowing around rocks. Like a fire that could not be contained. He used everything around him as a weapon. Crates became barriers and then projectiles. Machinery became traps. The soldiers' own strength became their weakness as they got in each other's way. He was faster than any human should be. Not because of supernatural ability, but because he wasted no movement. Every step, every strike, every breath was perfectly calculated. While the Krath fought with anger and pride, he fought with cold, patient efficiency. Soldiers fell. 5, 10, 20, they could not touch him. Every time they swung at where he was already somewhere else. Every time they thought they had him cornered, he slipped away and struck from behind. Yuna watched in stunned silence. She had seen great warriors in her life, champions of the arena, heroes of her empire. But but she had never seen anything like this. It was not just fighting, it was art. Lord Vec's laughter died in his throat. He watched his soldiers fall one by one, and something he had never felt before crept into his heart. Fear. "What are you?" he demanded. Duhan did not answer. He was already moving toward the warlord. His blade was red with blood. His body was covered in wounds. But his eyes were steady, and his hands were sure. Lord Vec roared and attacked. He was the strongest warrior of his dominion, a killer who had never been defeated. He swung his massive fist at the human's head with enough force to crush stone. Doan was not there. He had moved at the last possible moment, sliding past the blow like a ghost. His blade cut across Vec's arm. The warlord screamed in pain and rage. They fought, blow after blow, attack after attack. Vec was stronger, faster, bigger, but Doan was smarter. He used the warlord's anger against him, letting Vec waste his energy on attacks that hit nothing but air. When the moment came, Doan did not hesitate. He found the opening, the small gap in Vec's defense, and his blade struck true. Lord Vec fell to his knees. He looked up at the human with disbelief in his dying eyes. "Possible," he whispered. "You are just human." Doan stood over him, breathing hard, blood dripping from countless wounds. He spoke quietly. "Yes, I am just human. That is enough." The remaining Krath soldiers stared at their fallen lord. Fear spread through them like a disease. This human had done what they believed could not be done. He had killed Lord Vec in single combat. Before they could recover, a massive crash shook the cargo bay. The wall exploded inward, and through the smoke and fire came the familiar shape of the pale dawn. Nari had arrived. Doan grabbed Yuna's arm. Time to go. They ran for the ship as chaos erupted behind them. The Krath were too shocked to pursue. They could only watch as the human carried the princess aboard, and the strange ship flew back into the void of space. The impossible had happened, and the galaxy would never be the same. The pale dawn shot through space like a wounded bird fleeing from hunters. Behind them, the Krath warship grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. Nari pushed the engines harder than she ever had before, squeezing every bit of speed from the old ship. "They're not following," she reported from the cockpit. "I don't think they can believe what just happened. We actually did it." In the back of the ship, Yuna sat on a small medical bed. Her hands were shaking. She'd been so calm during the battle, but now that it was over, her body was finally letting go of all the fear she had held inside. She was alive. Against all logic, against all probability, she was alive and free. Doan sat across from her on the floor, his back against the wall. He was covered in blood, most of it his own. Cuts and burns marked his arms and chest. One of his eyes was swollen nearly shut. He looked like he should be dead. But he was still breathing, still conscious, still moving. Yuna watched as he began treating his own wounds. He moved slowly but steadily, cleaning each cut, applying medicine, wrapping bandages. He did not ask for help. He did not complain about the pain. "You should let me do that," she said. "You can barely see." "I can see well enough," he replied quietly, "and you should rest. It has been a long journey for you, a long journey for me." Yuna almost laughed. "I sat in a cell while you fought through an entire army. You killed Lord Vec himself, and you are telling me to rest?" Doan finished wrapping his arm and looked up at her. His face was tired but peaceful. "That is my job," he said simply. "What I am paid to do." Silence fell between them. The ship hummed softly as it carried them toward safety. After a while, Yuna spoke again. "Why do you do this? This work, these impossible missions. You could have died back there. You almost did die. Why risk everything for people you have never met?" Doan was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was distant, as if he was remembering things from long ago. "Humans have always been the underdogs," he said. "On our homeworld, we were not the biggest creatures. We were not the fastest or the strongest. There were animals that could kill us with one bite, Storms that could destroy our homes, diseases that could wipe out entire cities. We should have died out millions of years ago. He paused, looking at his bandaged hands. But we did not die. We learned to think. We learned to work together. We learned to keep fighting even when everything said we should give up. That stubbornness, that refusal to surrender, it is written into our blood. It is what makes us human. Yuna listened carefully. She had been taught all her life that humans were a minor species, barely worth consideration. The history books in her palace mentioned them only briefly, dismissing them as primitives from a distant corner of the galaxy. But now she was seeing the truth that those books had missed. "You did the impossible today," she said softly. "You walked into a fortress alone and walked out with a princess. The stories will be told for generations." Doan shook his head. "I did not do the impossible. I did what was necessary. There is always a way. You just have to be willing to find it." The journey back to Valari space took 3 days. Nari flew carefully, avoiding Krath patrols and taking hidden routes through empty sectors. During that time, Yuna and Doan talked many times. She asked about his past missions, his life, his homeworld. He asked about her empire, her family, her dreams. She found herself respecting him more and more. He was not like the warriors she had known. He did not boast about his victories or seek glory for his deeds. He was quiet and practical, doing what needed to be done and asking for nothing in return except the payment he was owed. When they finally entered Valari space, a escort of royal ships was waiting for them. Prince Tywin had sent the finest vessels in the fleet to bring his sister home. They surrounded the pale dawn like an honor guard, and together they made their way to the imperial capital. The royal palace was filled with people when they arrived. The entire court had gathered to welcome the princess home. Nobles and generals stood in their finest clothes, staring at the small, battered ship that had accomplished what no one thought possible. Prince Tywin was the first to approach. He embraced his sister tightly, tears in his eyes. "I never gave up hope," he whispered. "I knew you would come back." Yuna held him close. Then she stepped back and turned to face the crowd. She saw the way they looked at Doan, some with confusion, some with doubt, some with barely hidden contempt. This was just a human, their eyes said. How could this creature have done what they claimed? Yuna would not let that stand. She walked to the center of the grand hall and raised her voice so all could hear. "This man saved my life," she announced. He walked alone into the heart of enemy territory. He fought through an army. He killed Lord Vec in single combat. He did what no one in this empire believed could be done. And he is just one human. The crowd murmured in surprise. Yuna continued. "I was taught that humans were weak, that they were beneath our notice. I was wrong. The galaxy is wrong. This species, these stubborn, persistent, impossible humans, they have something that we do not understand. Something powerful. And I think we would be wise to learn from them." She turned to Doan. He stood quietly, showing no emotion, waiting for nothing. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Doe nodded once. "The contract is complete. Your brother's payment has been received. I will be leaving now." He walked toward his ship without looking back. No requests for glory. No speeches or celebrations. He had done his job and now he was moving on to the next one. Nari was waiting at the airlock. She smiled when she saw him. "Nice speech she gave," Nari said. "You're practically famous now." "Fame is dangerous," Doan replied. "People with fame get noticed. I prefer to be invisible." They boarded the pale dawn. The engines hummed to life. As the ship rose from the palace landing pad, Doan looked down at the world below. Thousands of people were watching. A princess who had believed humans were nothing now stood as their champion. Maybe things would change. Maybe they would not. Either way, it was not his concern. "Where to next?" Nari asked. Doan sat down in his usual chair and closed his eyes. His wounds still hurt. His body needed rest. But there was always another job, another mission, another impossible thing waiting to be done. "Wherever the work is," he said, "that is where we go." Pale dawn jumped into hyperspace and disappeared among the stars. Behind them, The galaxy buzzed with news of what had happened. A single human had changed everything. In somewhere in the shadows of space, that human was already preparing for the next challenge, because that was what humans did. They kept moving. They kept fighting. They never stopped. And the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that truly meant.